All right, my name is Alex Ortiz. I'm a reporter with the Herald News in Joliet, here for Shaw Media, Illinois. I'm here with Rick Laib, who is the Republican nominee for the 11th Congressional District. Mr. Laib is challenging the incumbent Representative Bill Foster in November's election. So we're just here to get to know him a little bit more. Mr. Laib, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alex. It's good to be with you.
Oh, I appreciate it. So first of all, just tell people a little bit about yourself, because you're from Joliet. You've had a very interesting career. Who are
Yes.
you?
So, lifelong resident of Joliet, been here my whole life, and love Joliet. 24-year veteran of the Will County Sheriff's Office. I've been assigned to a lot of Joliet, worked patrol in Joliet, so I really love Joliet. Going to the Sheriff's Office actually allowed me, that was my first kind of breaking out of seeing different parts of Joliet. Before, the widest areas of Joliet that I had known were going to school in Joliet and delivering pizzas in Joliet. But then as I worked for the county, then I got to learn other parts of the county and just other parts of Joliet and just the full 847 square miles of the county. So that was just really kind of opening and broadening my views on what was out there. And then I ran for a state seat 2 years ago, and then I learned different, more, kind of expanding. And then now obviously running for the congressional seat, learning more about this kind of geographical area. But that's, my view, that's my, growing up here in Joliet, growing up in this, in town here, working with the Sheriff's Office for the fullness of my career, 24 years, this fall of 24 years. I've worked patrol most of my career. I started in the jail, worked there for a good number of years, and was on our honor guard when we first started the honor guard. That was in 2003. I'm very proud of that time there. I served 14 and a half years on our SWAT team, and I've just been very blessed in my career, and I've been able to do a lot of different things, and I've had a lot of opportunities, and just really been blessed with my time at the Sheriff's Office.
Good. So I think I'd asked you this before, but why did you decide to run for this congressional seat? Why are you seeking now federal office?
Well, I ran for a state seat, and I really enjoyed my time, and I really didn't think of myself as somebody who would run for office. I was very content for most of my time here. Was content to serve as an informed voter. That's how I participated in politics. I advanced, taking membership in that role, taking an active involvement, knowing who you were voting for. And then in 2018, I ran as the Republican candidate for a state seat, just because there were no other candidates. There was no Republican candidate running. There was nobody running in 2016. Actually, the current state representative, Larry Walsh Jr., did not have a challenger. And I thought, I don't understand how he doesn't even have a challenger. And I gotten to know Larry, I met him, and we got along just fine. But I just was surprised that he didn't have a challenger. I just was amazed that it was that easy to get into politics. And at that office, it was easy. But then I ran again. I ran in 2018. I really enjoyed it. And then what I say is, you don't have to be. These aren't personal attacks. You don't have to dislike someone. It's just how you feel you're being represented. These people are representing you to their particular fields. So the state office represents you in Springfield. A congressional office represents you in DC. And if you're satisfied with your representation, fine. If you're not, then you can either vote differently or become the candidate. And so that's what I'm doing. I don't dislike Bill Foster. He seems like a very nice man. But I'm not satisfied with the way he's representing me. And so that's why I'm running against him.
Okay. Well, let's just get into the issues here. And I want to start kind of with the individual who kind of looms over all of politics these days, the president. And obviously, you were, wanting to be part of a co-equal branch with him. I'm going to ask you straight up. Do you think that this election, 2020, is a referendum on President Trump?
A referendum on President Trump? I think that President Trump has advanced things, advanced many issues, and really pushed some issues. He is not coddled. He is not light in his tone, and he has really advanced things. And I think people are either so passionate. He has moved things passionately. So people who have sort of liked him are passionate about him, and the people who sort of disliked him are passionately disliking him. So I guess I'm not sure I would use the word referendum, but I think that he has really advanced the presidential election more so than certainly ones that I'm familiar with, any presidential election that I've seen. I mean, it's just really seems like everybody will be a part of this election. And I think he's part of that. I think, what he's done in the last 4 years is really part of that.
Right. And obviously, he also has many of his critics. Just to get a little bit of most recent news, I'm sure you probably heard of this story about some comments he had made to journalist Bob Woodward, talking about his knowledge back in February about the novel coronavirus and kind of the severity of it. His comments on the record to Woodward seemed to indicate that he knew very early on about the severity of this, and obviously a lot of Democrats, including your opponent, have criticized the president, saying that he was misleading the public while he was telling journalists privately that he knew of the severity. He was saying in public that this was no big deal, it would go away. And a lot of people are very much blaming him for the mishandling and mismanagement to characterize their views of this pandemic. So I just want to know, kind of, what do you think about, if not those comments he made, then also just his overall handling of the pandemic that we are in?
Well, when the president is aware of something and he admits to knowing about something, I think then people they don't seem to be very merciful. They don't want to be very gracious, and they're not forgiving. They say, well, he knew about it. And that seems to imply that he would have known everything that could be known about it. He knows the full scope. So I don't know what the president refers to when he says he knows. I don't know how he could have known the fullness of what's going on here. I don't know that he could have known the scope and the reach and saying that it's dangerous. I don't know how he could possibly know that, because even now he is saying that we don't think it's that dangerous. We don't think it's, well, not that it's not dangerous. I don't mean to use that word. But the severity that it's taken, I don't think it's as critical as what we've seen. It's being managed. And he has had a part of that. And he's had a strong part of that and a very active part of that. And to some degree, the type of things that he's advanced, like hydroxychloroquine, this is a vaccine that he's advanced. He's not making it. He doesn't benefit from it. He just says it's working. People are benefiting from this. Now nobody wants to use it just because he's saying it. So he was very active in the beginning of getting help. He's worked with companies to get the equipment that we needed. At the beginning of this, in March, again, when this call started in March, nobody knew what was happening. I don't think anybody had an idea of what was going on. So I'm not very critical of any of our leadership, whether it's our governor or our president. I'm not critical of, we didn't know what was happening. But I think we know now, we have a different view on what the severity is, what it's capable of doing, how it spreads. I don't think we know everything yet. But we know more than we did a couple of months ago. So I think that the president, he could say, he says we knew about it, or he knows what's going on. He's briefed on these kinds of things. He's aware of these kinds of things. That he knows what's actionable. I don't know. I know lots of people know there's all kinds of things that we do that are unhealthy that people know about, and they don't take action on it. So I'm not excusing and saying, well, he should have done more, but I don't know what he could have done more. He's aware of it. They continue to get information. And then when things started to kind of take a head in the middle of March, the kind of magical week, March 17th, 18th, somewhere right in there, things started to kind of escalate. Well, then he was very instrumental, including trying to connect help to the governors, the different states, again, rallying the different companies, production companies that could produce the type of equipment that we needed. So he made that, I think, a very clear priority. So I don't know what there is to dislike about the action that he's taken.
Okay, so a couple points there. So first of all, about the hydroxychloroquine point, I think public health officials have said that it is not necessarily a good thing to take for this virus on that point. But to your point about what he could have known at the time, again, this is February, March, when he was making these comments to Mr. Woodward. I am quoting here from an AP story here that he said, okay. He told Woodward on February 7th, quote, "You just breathe the air and that's how it's passed," referring to how it's airborne virus. And this quote, and so that's a very tricky one. That's a very delicate one. It's also more deadly than even your strenuous flu. So this is February 7th, he's making this proclamation to Woodward, saying this is more serious than the average virus that you have. So it seems like she's pretty well aware that this is a significant deal on February 7th, well before many of us even knew a whole lot about this. And yes, we've learned a lot more about the virus since then, but
Right.
I think his critics are saying that this shows that he knew it personally, but publicly he was attempting to minimize it.
Well, again, this is not the first time we've had a virus. I think, again, because we have seen the last couple of months, we have formed an opinion on the way that he should have responded. We had the Wuhan virus. I don't remember anyone shutting down schools or shutting down the way that we did. I think, to say, okay, well, he should have shut things down. Well, we haven't shut things down in the past. And I have no reason to think that he wouldn't have thought that. He would have said, okay, there is something happening. We know that it's deadly. We know that it's happening, but it doesn't have the same kind of spread. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but he's still watching it. I don't see why that would still be a critical remark. I mean, again, it's something that's happened. When it happened, we're still developing that information. We're still kind of learning about it, but I don't see why him acknowledging it would be a slant again. He's aware of it. He knows it's happening. But again, that would still be on par with any kind of virus that we have. We haven't done anything different than, actually, we've done more for this virus than we've done in the past for other viruses. I don't see why it wouldn't be reasonable to think that in his mind, if it's deadly, it just puts us on par with other viruses that we've seen in the United States. And he's thinking, okay, then we will respond to them similar. We'll watch them, we're identifying who has it, and we're getting the treatment for the people that have it.
Okay, related to this, I want to move on to some of the comments and some of the criticisms he's made, kind of downplaying or kind of flouting some of the public health advice from experts. I think it's kind of interesting because, your opponent, who is a PhD physicist, he has talked a lot about the importance of scientific fact and believing in experts and respect for expertise and respecting science. So I wonder, do you also see a kind of a lack of trust in our major institutions, whether it be the news media that I'm a part of, or in scientific research or experts? Is this lack of trust or declining trust in expertise in institutions something of a concern for you?
Well, I think, right, yes, there's expertise. We go back to, now I commented earlier about hydroxychloroquine. We have people who are in the field who are saying that we use hydroxychloroquine. It's very helpful. We have very good results, and their positions are being silenced. Well, now I don't know who's doing that silencing. I'm not pointing the finger at anyone. I'm saying that we know that this is happening. So then this starts to raise some question in people's minds. And when those kinds of slivers, those little wedges start to be burrowed, and people cannot emotionally or intellectually say, okay, well, then I can fully trust this person. So if Congressman Foster is saying, well, we're not trusting the science, well, I think lots of people aren't trusting the science. I think both sides are saying that we're not trusting the science. If there's some kind of agenda, if people start to suspect an agenda is at play, then yeah, I think that people will start to question what's being presented as the science.
By an agenda, you mean that, again, for example, related to the pandemic, public health experts are politically motivated to say, we need to do A, B, and C to make sure this virus doesn't spread? Is that the implication you're making?
Well, I wouldn't rule that out. We know that some of these medications are less expensive than this vaccine. They're running past this vaccine. We know that there is a certain kind of, condition that how dare you not take a vaccine? Look, we know that we know more about COVID-19 than we did before. We know that it's not passed by two people standing next to each other. You basically have to be standing next to each other having a conversation. We know that it's...
Well, no, it is airborne. There have been demonstrated cases where if people are in a room, but they're not necessarily next to each other, they can contract it. So that's, I think that's pretty much, that's not really in contention here at least from.
Okay, so do you see that we're, even on this point, that we're in disagreement? So if there's medical experts saying that people cannot get it passing each other, and some are saying, well, yes, there's documented that they can, then it would seem to me that further testing would need to be done.
Oh, by passing each other, you mean like they're on the sidewalk and they walk past each other, or?
People, they're saying, yes, people have to be close to each other. They have to be actually having some type of prolonged conversation with each other. They have to actually have some type of, like, there has to be some positioning right next to each other. Not just a mere passing each other.
Okay.
But
Well,
you see people who don't have the masks on, and we say, oh, how dare you? So we've kind of taken this kind of culture. Now, I'm not trying to make that point. I'm not trying to argue that point. What I'm saying is I can see why people would start to question that then.
why do you think people question it?
Because if somebody's saying, if it doesn't make sense to them, then they will start to question it. They're saying, look, I know all these people who are fine. I know people who have survived from this. We have doctors who are coming out and they're saying, look, we're giving these medications, we're treating these people. Look at just here in Will County, there was a mistake in the way the numbers. Now, again, I'm not saying anything.
Well, okay, hold on. So I've been literally today, I was trying to get down to the bottom of this.
Okay.
You're referring to some questions that a lot of local officials had about how the state, the Illinois Department of Public Health, is calculating the test positivity rate, which determines whether or not our region needs more restrictions, right?
Correct.
Okay. They have, I don't think there was a mistake. I think it was just the IDPH wasn't necessarily, I guess maybe fully transparent when it came to which data sets they were using. And although they have explained it to other people who have, we have the answers now. They're using raw data that is actually not on their website, although they have been giving it out to the public who've been asking for it. So there really wasn't been a mistake. I guess there was some lack of clarity as to in terms of what numbers they were using.
Okay. So we'll use your words. Lack of clarity, fully transparent. We know that people are losing their jobs, their businesses are closing, and they have to stay home. What we're doing with our schools, we're taking people out of schools. And if somebody's saying, oh, wait a second, now we're getting a report of a lack of fully transparency and lack of clarity. So then all of a sudden, these are the kinds of things that people will start to ask more questions. And they're saying, okay, well, wait a second. Can I trust these people? Now, I'm not saying these individuals are lying. But if they're saying fully transparent, well, I don't know if I can trust these people anymore. So again, I'm just trying to respond to your point about trusting the experts. When these kinds of stories emerge, I think it's absolutely rational for people to say, okay, well, now what are we listening to? Why wouldn't you? That's what a thinking person does. It says, okay, well, I have more questions here. I need to know what's going on. We have to get some more information, and we have to be free to be accountable. Somebody has to say, okay, yes, we did this, or yes, we weren't transparent, or whatever word we want to use. Somebody has to be accountable for that. I don't see why I don't see the harm in that.
Okay. Let's move on. So at the beginning of this, you referred to obviously your long career in law enforcement.
Yes.
So obviously this has also been a subject as of late when it comes to matters of racial inequality in our country. And so I just want to ask straight up, do you think there is such thing as institutional racism or systemic racism within the criminal justice system of the United States?
No.
Why?
For absence of reason to think otherwise.
Do you give any sort of legitimacy to the claims that, among people of color, especially African Americans, that whether it comes to arrests or incarceration or, violence brought upon by police officers, that, again, people of color, especially African Americans, are disproportionately negatively impacted by some of those policies?
I know that there are some significant numbers. I know that there's some significant differences, but I don't know why that the conclusion that you would draw, the police are racist. The police have a habit of moving towards where the crime is at. Mm-hmm. And so when somebody is saying, well, the police are targeting, the police don't target anybody. The police target criminals. They move towards where the crime is or the crime action, whatever is happening there.
To be fair, I think it's a little more nuanced than to say that police are racist, because I think that's probably more of an individual attribution. I think the critique is that there are a set of policies that have been put in place that have made the criminal justice system as a system biased against African Americans, biased against people of color, against poor people, et cetera. And that, whether it be mandatory minimum sentences or disparate sentences for different types of drug use, things like that, that those policies have disproportionately negatively impacted communities of color. I think that's the critique here.
I'm happy to hear those policies. I don't know what policies. I know the policies out there that are affirm law enforcement action. That's what the police do. So I'm curious. I'm happy to hear what those policies are that would favor someone who is, or disfavor someone who is Black, or someone who is not, favor someone who is not Black. I'm curious to hear those policies. I know that there are policies out there. I understand, what people are saying, but I don't see them. Like I say, I've been here for 24 years I've been a police officer. I've with the sheriff's office for 24 years. And I'm happy to see these policies. I just know too many police officers. People can say, I know that people want to say that the police are racist. I understand it and I get it. But that argument's not going to weigh on me. For somebody who's in it, they're going to have to make that argument for somebody who's an outsider. I just know too many police officers. So, and I know, I've been in this too long, and I've seen I've been on patrol. I've moved towards where crime is at. So for somebody to make the case that says, you represent a discipline, maybe you, Rick Laib, maybe you're not racist, but that you represent a discipline that's racist, that's not supported.
Have you actively tried to, reach out to individuals who have these complaints about law enforcement, or who have these views that you may say you don't see any really evidence for? Have you tried to dig into maybe the data at all? Have you tried to see why people say make these arguments?
I understand. I understand the numbers. I understand where people are saying there's more African American males incarcerated, but that doesn't strike me as a view on the police. That strikes me more as a view on absentee fatherism. I mean, these type of things are connected, and we want to make this case of saying, okay, but these, what category of individual more than likely does not have a father figure? And then to say, okay, but we're not going to talk about that. We're just going to kind of blame things on the police, or point the direction of the police, or point this at the police. So I understand these arguments. I've heard them, and I understand it, and I get it.
What do you mean you get it? Because it sounds like you don't exactly agree with them. So, but what do you get it? What do you mean by that?
I understand their views. I certainly understand it. They're not foggy on me. I understand the claims that they're making, that the police are racist, that more Black men are incarcerated than white men.
But
I understand the view, but I don't agree with that conclusion. The conclusion then is that, well, then the police must be racist, but that doesn't.
So then what do you attribute any sort of disparities within the criminal justice system to?
Well, like I say, there's a number of different reasons on why there could be a category of individual, a higher category. Again, that does not seem to be, when I tell people, or when anybody can do the information, can look it up and see what is the rate of fatherlessness in the Black community. If they don't have a strong father figure, if the Black men do not have a strong father figure, or Black women do not have a strong father figure, that's going to have a direct result on the way that they're brought up. There is an absence of a different kind of authority. There's an absence of a different kind of moral code. There is a different kind of pressure that's put on mom. And so these things all play together. And so when somebody says, okay, but wait a second, then that means the police are racist. That is not a conclusion that I would follow. And I don't think that's fair, quite frankly.
Okay. Well, okay. So you mentioned this point a couple times now. So you attribute at least some of this to individuals who may not have had a present father in their lives?
I'm saying that that point can't be denied. I don't know why the conclusion would be the police are racist.
What about the other kind of critiques that they say where, they say, you look at the communities that have been disproportionately affected by violence and crime, that these are also communities that have been historically divested from. They don't have the type of economic or educational opportunities that you might have in other more wealthy, prosperous areas. The average African-American family has about 1/10 the wealth of the average white family. All of these other, beyond just criminal justice, all of these other types of disparities that they point to also historically to legislation that contribute to that. What about those types of critiques? What do you make of those?
Those type of critiques, that then would be good arguments for less government control, allowing people to develop for themselves, to pursue their own livelihood, to pursue a school that they want, to move to an area that they want, and not be hampered down. I think government involvement tends to restrict the growth. It doesn't prosper. It doesn't provide for more. It actually slows things down. And so then the claims that you're making, that would be an argument then of getting people out from under government control. But again, that's still not, I wouldn't think that the conclusion is that the police are racist or that there's a systemic racism in law enforcement.
Sticking with the point about government control, I know we talked a lot about, and I think it's fair to say you focus much of your policy message and much of your campaign on the issue of reproductive rights. You are, I think it's a very staunchly anti-abortion. Is that fair to say?
Very pro-life, yes, sir.
Okay. I wonder if you kind of, looking at your view in the context of the modern day we're in, I think it's pretty conclusive that if not at least half, a majority of Americans simply just don't agree with that point. I don't know what the specifics are for the district or for Will County or whatever, but I would imagine you're probably out of step with a lot of voters. What do you say to those individuals who say, whoa, 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 if you're talking about government control, I don't want the government controlling my body or what I do with my body. So what would you say to those individuals?
Well, to be fair, I don't agree with the fact that I am out of step with anyone. I think that anyone who holds any kind of position has a life, and to that degree, they can't disagree with me without having a life. So I think to some degree, they would favor that. So I don't see, and I don't agree with the fact that I'm in the minority. I don't believe that. I know that there are a lot of people who disagree with me, and I get that as well. But I don't know that I'm in the minority. I don't know. I don't know why. I'm curious to hear that number or how you would arrive at that.
Okay, so this is just one poll, but I'm looking at a Pew Research Center polling, tracking the opinions of individuals over a long period of time. And it looks like pretty much the last probably decade or so, it's been, if not more, it's been pretty solid where not a huge majority, but a majority, between maybe 50 and 60% of Americans say that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. So obviously degrees of opinion here.
Okay.
I'm looking also some Gallup polling that from this year or recent years that, again, it's probably, it's mixed here, but probably about, at worst, 50-50 or close to that. So again, it's even if it's half, that's a pretty sizable portion of the population that simply disagrees with you.
Okay, so let's do it. Let me do this. Let's change the results of the poll. Let's say most people, let's say you're right. Let's say almost all. Let's say I'm by myself on this issue. Well, that doesn't make it right. I can't, should we go back to slavery? Should we say, well, most people thought slavery was okay, so it should be okay? I don't, these are not, these kind of moral decisions, certainly about life, we can't arrive at just by counting noses. And we say, okay, well, most of the people think it's okay to destroy a human being. We should be okay to destroy a human being. As a matter of fact, if I am by myself, if everyone in the universe says that, no, you should be able to destroy a human being, innocent human beings. You should be able to destroy them. And I by myself, well, then I'm rolling my sleeves up for a different kind of war, but it doesn't change it. You can take any law. Let's just pass a law that says rape is okay. Does that make it okay? Just because we passed a law and we says it's okay, you say, well, you're kind of in the minority on this one. I think you should kind of, no, nobody would. That would make sense on any level. Nobody would make sense to that. Nobody would buy that. And even if they did, they pass a law and says that you should be able to steal things, you should be able to, that doesn't make it right. And so if I'm out of step with the poll, or if you're right in saying most people, and I don't believe that, I get a lot of support, I get a lot of encouragement, I get a lot of feedback. And again, I'll go back to my own experiences, Alex. Just when I was signing petitions, I got a lot of signatures on my own, and that's good old-fashioned knocking on the door. Hi, people opening in a crack. You very quickly. Hi, my name is Rick Laib. I'm running for the 11th Congressional District. I'm wanting you to sign my. You get it very quickly, and the number of people who asked me, "What do you think of abortion?" And when I would respond, I think it's murder, most people did not have any more questions for me. So maybe on the view of the individuals that you're, like the numbers that you're looking at, maybe I just got lucky. Maybe I just hit mostly pro-life people. Fine, I'm fine with that. But even if I'm by myself, and I don't think I am, I don't see why we cannot just sit by while human life is being destroyed. So, or I can't do it. So there's that. This goes back to the point of saying, if you're feeling that you are you're not being represented well, and I don't think that I am, okay, well then this is an area that I campaign. I cannot think of anything else that we're going to talk about that's going to make any sense if the sanctity of human life is not preserved. And it really doesn't matter. We can agree. We can say, the Congress should continue to spend, or we can talk about fiscal problems, or rioting, or racist police, anything. But none of it matters if people cannot be alive. If that does not happen, that is not fixed in our society, and I don't think it is. So that's why, yes, it is taking kind of it's kind of taken a central focus for me. I don't really know what else it is that we're talking about if we're not talking about people being innocently destroyed.
Okay, let's move on to another topic here.
Okay.
Another issue that is just kind of perpetually in the news is also related to our gun laws in the country.
Okay.
I think it's pretty safe to say that the Democratic Party has pretty much shifted mostly to the stance of being in favor of universal background checks, banning assault weapons, and I know there's varying degrees of definition about what an assault weapon actually is, but measures like that. What do you think about where that discourse is in the modern day in regard to gun control?
Yeah, let's. So I appreciate that you're saying you're right. The Democratic Party is advocating for that. So I'll say this: we'll take the Democrats out for just a second. Anybody who advances those, and I know people who advance those. They say we should be doing more background checks. We should be doing more. This, I guess, again, is a view that's informed by my background in law enforcement, which is that bad guys, you can't really tell if they don't want to be known. I think that the background checks, I think that these different kinds of checks, I think they're feel-good moves. I think somebody says, hey, there's a background, it's been done, and now we should feel better. And I don't think that you should. I wouldn't tell somebody, say, hey, listen, this guy's did a background check. And there's nothing came up in his background check. There's lots and lots of first-time criminals. The gentleman, the Las Vegas shooter from a couple of years ago, he just slipped right in. Nobody knew who he was. I don't see why a background check would have done anything. And even if a background check is designed to, say, restrict somebody from using a firearm illegally, if they've already committed to a path of using it illegally, I don't see why a background check would have stopped them. I understand the arguments. Again, I understand those arguments. But I think it's incumbent then on a general appearance. So any type of law enforcement in an area, if you have, let's say you have a crowd, you don't have a police officer for every person. You usually have a presence. And that is enough of a deterrence for many people, even people driving down the interstate. They might see one, you're driving from here to Chicago, or Chicago back. You might see one or two state troopers, but that's enough of a deterrence. People don't want any trouble. So it seems to me then to really make the people safe, free from this kind of fear, is to actually encourage the Second Amendment. And that doesn't even mean everybody needs a gun or should carry a gun. I'm not saying they ought to, but there are people who will commit to themselves to the time and the training, and they'll be proficient. And now you have kind of a general sense of that somebody might have a firearm, and that usually is enough deterrence to move the cowards away.
Okay, well, I was about to ask you kind of what you feel about what solution do you feel would be appropriate to address, because I think it's also pretty undeniable that this year we have seen a spike in gun violence in a lot of major cities. And I don't know the exact numbers for Joliet, but at least anecdotally, it seems like it's been a high number of violent incidents. And so I guess you kind of started talking about there, but what you think the solutions to solving that issue are?
Well, I would say the only people that are obeying gun laws are the obedient citizens, not the people who don't. So we would want to take off those kinds of restrictions from the obedient workers, the people who say, look, I know what the potential of a firearm is, I know what it can do, and I am willing to commit. We're just making it hard. As soon as they said, look at all of the guns-free zones, no guns on a school. Well, now you've just basically advertised and you're saying there is no consequence for you to come on this property. The police will show up, they'll eventually get here, but there's no one on the campus, or certainly no one that should have a firearm. So we've basically opened the door. So just like even in that small example, it would seem to me that it would behoove the government, would actually make its citizens safer by easing up on the restrictions that they place on gun carriers, so anyone who loves the Second Amendment.
Do you have specific restrictions you think should not be implemented or in place right now?
I don't place any. The Second Amendment doesn't place any. I don't place any. Every time I hear kind of a restriction saying, well, what about this kind of character of individual, our category of individual? I can think of individuals that it wouldn't be safe. Saying, okay, so you're going to let a 2-year-old have a firearm or a 3-year-old have a firearm? No, that doesn't make any sense. I wouldn't do that. You wouldn't let a 3-year-old drive a car, but you do let someone drive a car under proper parenting, right? There's some discipleship there. People much younger than 16 have gone to war. People much younger than 16 have hunted for their own.
Well, that was a long time ago, though.
What's that?
That was a long time ago, though.
It was.
I don't think 16-year-olds are overseas right now.
What are we seeing that was a long time ago? A different kind of family unit. That's simply the point I'm trying to make, Alex. It was a different kind of family unit. There was a different kind of discipleship that was taking place within the family. There was a different kind of attention that was being given. And so those type of things, you suddenly took a unsafe or a potentially unsafe action, and those type of things were communicated, and it made it safe. My dad taught me how to drive a car. My mom taught me how to drive a car. But if no one was around to drive a car, can you imagine, we're getting to a point where you're saying, well, you shouldn't drive a car until you're the 30s or 40s, or we'd have to kind of step up on the schooling but we don't have to do that, because most teenagers will have an adult and usually a parent, because the parents are tired of driving kids around. And they'll say, okay, good. All right, listen, we want you to be a good driver. I want you on the road with me. I'm going to show you how. But that argument is kind of lost when it comes to carrying a gun. And I get, like I say, I see it, but that would seem to me when somebody says, well, what kind of restrictions would you place? Well, I don't place those kind of restrictions. I don't, because the Second Amendment doesn't.
Okay, let's move on again to another important issue that, again, is kind of perpetually in the news. Healthcare. Obviously, I think the Democrats definitely want to expand, improve upon the Affordable Care Act, commonly known as Obamacare. They have made the case to basically try to cover as many people as possible. I believe we're about 90% covered in the United States, which leaves probably less than 30 million people who are without insurance. What types of measures do you think should be taken to expand the number of people who are insured, especially during, a global pandemic?
Right. I understand during a global pandemic. So that just those last couple of words, I think that would kind of change the characterization of how I would respond. I understand any kind of these kind of bailouts that are coming on. We're just kind of what they're disagreeing on is the size and who's getting paid out. So I'm going to come back to healthcare in just a second. But when it comes to bailouts, I understand pandemics where a large number of people, an unforeseen action is taken, something that we really couldn't have prepared for. I understand the government stepping in. All right, now let's step back for just a second. Outside of that, then I would say it would be healthy. More people can actually get coverage, and many people can get better coverage when the government steps out. So I will always be going to a point where I'm saying the government should get out of healthcare, and that would be my starting point. And then anything outside of that would be shrinking back, shrinking back, shrinking back. The less that the government does, the more that people can do on their own and come up with kind of creative. Right now, there's really no burden for people to work out creative options with healthcare providers. And I'm not even talking about employers, although I think that would be helpful as well. But people who don't have or aren't working, they can still work out some type of creative option with a healthcare provider, but they don't have to. The healthcare providers do not have to, and other people don't have to, because they know the government will take care of them. And I am not convinced, nor am I persuaded to believe, that that's the role of government, to come in and take over, and we will tell you what doctors you can use, and we will provide these, you will use these services at this time, and you will, if you spend this time on this list. And so I'm not persuaded to believe that that's the healthiest option. I know that it has worked for some people. I don't think it's the healthiest option. So I would always be advancing this idea of diminishing the government's presence in healthcare.
Okay, two follow-ups on that. One,
Okay.
When you say you're not sure, you don't think there's any sort of burdens. I would think a lot of people would say the burden for them to get health insurance on the private market is just cost. I mean, I think just
Yes.
a lot of people say it just costs too much. So what do you do with those types of issues?
Okay, because there's cost goes down when competition goes up. Nobody is fighting for customers in the healthcare business. The only people that are fighting for customers, I should say no one, you ready? Largely, no one is fighting for customers in the healthcare business. The people that are fighting for customers are the type of services that are not covered by the government. For example, LASIX, kind of corrective surgery. There's maybe some insurance programs that cover it, but largely it's not covered by your insurance program. So it has forced the providers to develop and get better and kind of work and test and say, okay, how can we make our services more attractive? And they say, how can we be more efficient in it? Where can we, just what any kind of business does, how can we get better? How can we offer a better product to the consumer at a less cost? And because then our profits will go, and that's what's happening. We have seen the costs used to be like $3,000 an eye. Then it was $3,000 for both eyes. And it's just kind of going down and going down and going down because there's competition. So I understand the cost. So when somebody says, most people can't get the insurance because of cost, I agree. That's correct. So let's reintroduce a sense of competition. That'll happen with the government stepping out. Competition will go up. Everybody wins. Everybody wins. There will be a better healthcare will be given out. There's better services can be offered, and it will be so at a different cost.
Well, on that point, I think a lot of people who maybe have critiques of the private healthcare system, I think it's like 50% of the United States are covered through their private employer.
Okay.
So it's not a small portion of the country that has insurance on the private market.
Right.
Yet, when you compare us to many other wealthy industrialized countries, we pay huge amounts more for very basic stuff. I mean, there's been legislation recently in the state legislature to lower the cost of very important diabetes drugs. Right. It has seemingly got more and more expensive. I think the statistic people always cite is our portion of our GDP spent on healthcare is huge compared to other countries who have fully government-run health insurance systems. So it seems the private market in this case is failing on that point of actually getting costs down because there's a lot more competition in a system like ours versus a system like Canada's, which they have single payer?
I'm not persuaded to believe that the government is out of healthcare in the United States. This is what I'm suggesting. The competition that I'm advancing would come when the government steps out. Let's say the government doesn't step out. It certainly can't be more government involvement. If people are thinking that the costs they're paying now are high, I don't think more government involvement is going to decrease the costs. That doesn't make any sense to me, to think, okay, if I am paying a lot now and more government involvement would mean less costs. I don't see that in any other aspect where the government has gotten involved. The government has complicated things. I can't think of anything that I do now freely, just like turning the light switch on and off, where if the government got involved, that it would make things easier. And so again, I am suggesting that the government get out of the healthcare business. I understand that there are different regions and different countries where the government covers things, but I'm not persuaded to believe that everyone is satisfied with the kind of healthcare that they give. I'm sure it works for some people. You know, some people at the top of the list, they're probably doing really well. But why are we taking that chance? Why take that chance? Why are we moving in that direction of this kind of government, complete government takeover? And I think that's the path that we're on. So my position is to get government out of healthcare, and let's see what happens. And I don't think people are going to be dissatisfied with the results. I don't see why they would. But people can work directly with their healthcare providers.
So on this point about you wanting government to get out of healthcare, and again, I think I've asked you about this before, but what do you do with Medicare and Medicaid and the VA? I mean, those are pretty popular programs that a lot of seniors and low-income folks depend on.
Right.
What do you do with them?
I don't have a timeline, and I think this is kind of one of those default answers where I give a response to just basically acknowledge that my background is in law enforcement and that I've never been a congressman before. And for somebody to say, you know, how would you fix these things? I don't have a sense that it would fix it tomorrow. I don't say, okay, we need to kind of eliminate those programs tomorrow. We have to kind of identify some kind of track, though. And the track has to be less of the government. So Medicare, Medicaid, VA benefits, I understand that. People are relying, they've benefited from them, fine. But then we have to agree that the direction is not growing those. The direction would have to be start minimizing those and not saying, okay, we're going to expand. So even if it's not, if I say the goal here is to get government out of healthcare, response. What about Medicaid? What about Medicare? People are benefiting them. They're on them right now. They need that. Fine. They could then, but we should still be looking at least stopping things or start diminishing those services and not, I don't know how that would work. And I'm not saying it's done overnight. I'm not saying it's just a quick, it's just, we're taking an axe to those type of things. But we have to at least acknowledge that things are not going to cost less by more government involvement and expanding those services.
To be clear, you mean, when you say stop, you mean to cap the amount of money that we're putting towards those programs? Is that what you mean?
Thank you for the clarification. I think when I say government get out of healthcare, I think for many people that means eliminating those programs immediately. And I understand that they have worked their way, to our own discredit, they have worked their way into people's lives, and they don't have other options. I don't think that's fair to just say, okay, today is Thursday, tomorrow is Friday, you're on your own on Friday. So all I'm simply saying is start looking at how we can restrain government in this area, look at ways to diminish it. I don't think people are even open to that conversation. What they want is the opposite. I think I'm suggesting something that's pretty conservative, simply saying, okay, don't expand on the services. And that's not the argument, the counter argument. The counter argument is, no, we need to expand. We need to do more. Somebody's got to pay for those services.
But again, when I think when people hear the word restrict, they may think you mean to cut those programs, if not entirely, at least partially. So, where population is aging, people are living longer, they
Right.
can't always work. There may very well be more seniors in the future who have to rely on
Right.
Medicare, for example.
Right.
So does that mean that you don't want that program to grow to meet those demands? What exactly are you calling for?
There are different kinds of services that are promised and provided in Medicare and Medicaid. And the sense that I get is that anybody advocating a different position from mine is not to cap or to say um, we can't diminish. The opposite view is we need to grow them. We need to do more for people. We should start offering these services at an earlier age. We should start offering these services at a larger category of individual. This should cover more. And what I'm simply saying is, all I'm saying here is that the scope of those programs should not be growing. They should either stop growing or start diminishing. Diminishing would be best, but that takes time. It would take a while to turn that ship around, and I understand that. So we've got to hold then, but not grow. That would be, out of those three options, growing would be the one that would be most harmful.
But again, you're I guess by that definition, you know, if you cap its growth rate right now, again for Medicare, that means that any more seniors who may need Medicare won't be able to get that. Is that a fair?
Well, at some point, but what I'm saying is the seniors who need that Medicare would still get it, but we're capping the type of services. We're not expanding on those services, and we're not expanding on the category of individual. We're not starting it at an earlier age.
So then we just keep it the way it is then? Don't add any more money to it? Don't.
Okay, well, yeah, keeping it the way it is would be an attractive option to what I think is being proposed, which is to grow it. And so that's what I'm suggesting is, whatever word you want to use, don't grow it. And capping would be fine. Stopping it would be fine. Holding would be fine. Just don't grow. So you're saying, well, what about seniors who are relying on it tomorrow or the year after or the year after that? Okay, well, it's still around. Nothing's been cut. But we cannot keep expanding on this. What is the overall budget? What is the overall bottom line? We cannot expand on that number. So if the option is not to cut it, then at least it would be to hold it.
Okay.
So I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to work around. I'm trying to respond to the question that you're asking. I hope I'm making myself clear.
Well, we can move on. That's good.
Oh,
I want to go to our last topic here before I let you go. So obviously we have an election in less than 2 months. We are also doing this, again, in the midst of a global pandemic.
Right.
Much has been made about the availability of mail-in voting, which obviously a lot of is sparking some unprecedented interest because for obvious reasons.
Right.
You know, we've done stories where a lot of local county clerks' offices are receiving record numbers of ballot requests, but a lot of people, especially in your party, have cast a lot of doubt about how this operation is going, and you know, there are accusations of widespread fraud with the amount of mail-in voting we're doing. Do you also have some of these concerns about mail-in voting, or do you agree with the people who say no, it's very safe? Voting fraud is extremely rare, like some of the critics of those individuals say.
I don't think it's rare. I know that it happens. I don't know that I wouldn't use that word rampant.
How often do you think it happens?
What's that?
How often do you think it happens?
Well, there's several cases that happened just last year, within the last.
Well, what's several?
12 months. What's that?
What's several?
I know of two. I don't have the specifics. I'm happy to look them up for you. I just heard the other day.
Was this just in Illinois?
No, they're nationally.
So 2 out of millions, tens of millions of votes?
To be fair, I said 2 that I know of. Okay. I can confidently speak that 2 happened. I've not said that more. I would think that more has taken place. I'm happy to.
But do you have specific numbers though? Because when we say it happens more than rarely.
Right.
Let's be specific. What is it? What is the number you put in it? Because the number I see cited by experts is a fraction of 1%. I mean, it's almost never.
That's fine. Let's go with your number. Fraction of 1%. That's still too much. I don't see why. I don't know why people are okay with a fraction of 1%. I don't know, when we have a system that is working, and if you're a fraction of 1%, we're still having problems. I don't know why we would, again, add another step to the voting process. That does not make sense to me. I think that there is voter fraud that takes place. I don't think it's hard to look up. I don't think those cases are hard to find. So a fraction of 1%, maybe it's just 1%, maybe it's 0.5%. That's still too much.
Well, on the point you say you don't think it's hard to find, I mean, I would think that people who, like election officials who monitor stuff, say, yes, because we've made it so that if someone commits voter fraud, we can catch them and hold them accountable, and it gets resolved.
Yes. Yes, these are all good arguments for not putting another step in the voting process. We're agreeing that voter fraud takes place, correct?
Extremely rarely.
But it does happen.
Well, people get hit by lightning, but it's also extremely rare. Like, it's not exactly something that you have to worry about all the time.
Yeah, that's correct. And it's so rare that even if you're playing outside and it's raining, mom tells you to get away from the tree, because it might happen. And so that, again, this is, we want to safeguard our elections. And so even if it's so rare, maybe it could happen. Good. Let's not put more steps in the process. We know things that get lost in the mail. My DVDs get lost from Netflix from time to time. Why would you put something, this is for most people the only say on the electoral process that's guaranteed them in the Constitution. Why would they say, okay, let's put another step in there? If fraud sort of takes place, why would we introduce another element? So even if it's saying, the point I'm simply making here is that it does happen. And you said, well, sort of happens, sometimes happens, very rare. Fine. It very rarely happens. That very rarely happens is enough to say, okay, good. We need to tighten up the way things already are and not introduce another step.
So this is a very interesting formation of your argument, just because I don't think you were downplaying the severity of the pandemic early, right? That I wouldn't say that, but a lot of people in your party, actually a lot of people in the Democratic Party, let's say, or people who are critical of the president, for example, they kind of use this rhetorical trick, like, wait, if an extremely small amount of voter fraud is enough to say, no, we shouldn't do that, yet only a 1%, or however you want to say, the mortality rate for COVID-19 is nowhere near enough reason to, shut down a lot of our economy. There seems to be somewhat of a cognitive dissonance there. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to some of those critiques that come about, because I think that's a fair point to bring up when it comes to extremely rare voter fraud, huge deal. In the United States, we're getting close to 200,000 deaths from COVID-19. It's not worth shutting down our economy for.
Mm-hmm. Those kinds of the death tolls, I've always, I admit, I sometimes gloss over, because people they say we should be doing all of these type of things because of all of these deaths. And we'll far surpass that with the number of abortions that take place this year, and nobody's batting an eye. And we've done that every year for the last some 40 years. So nobody's batting an eye for that. So that's why I sometimes am skeptical when somebody says, look at all of these lives that are being lost to COVID. I think, okay, so life is important then? But nobody says anything. So we have to, what's important then are these lives. And the lives that are being lost by COVID, I'm questioning some of those numbers. And I think that we have good reason to say that people are recovering from this terrible, terrible disease. So to say that it hardly ever happens, I'm saying, yeah, but there's recovery. We've taken some steps. So when we go back to now the election, we're talking about, again, something that you say, well, it hardly ever happens. Okay, well, because it hardly ever happens, I still see no good reason to introduce more steps. I I don't know why voter fraud exists. We know that it happens. That's not an argument, because it hardly ever happens. It's not an affirmative argument of that we should do mail-in votes. I don't like mail-in votes just because somebody who goes in and votes, they should be able to, if there's some kind of problem, there is a clerk right there that can handle it right there. And you do not have that luck when you're mailing it in. If it does, if
they absolutely handle that. You mail your ballot in,
right?
The clerk's office receives it. They confirm your name. They confirm your signature. They confirm all sorts of identifying data about you. They handle it. It's not like nobody sees it. Like nobody checks it out.
That's not the point I'm making. What if there's a problem with the ballot? It's not filled out correctly.
I talked to the Will County Clerk's office about this. They give the voter, they call the voter, they notify the voter. I don't know if it's called. They notify the voter about some sort of problem, and they give them an opportunity to fix it.
Okay, well, there's 5 counties that are represented in the 11th congressional district, and if somebody votes, if somebody calls it in on the, on the 2nd, or they mail it in on the 2nd, I don't know that they're going to have that kind of time. I'm not confident to believe that they're going to have that time to resolve it. When we have a system that works, people going in and voting in person. If people are afraid of the disease and saying, I'm afraid, then it would seem to me that it's incumbent on these county clerks to come up with, to work with partners and saying, how can we come up with more locations, but people could still vote in person. That's what voter fraud is diminished by, and any kind of problems that come in from just somebody submitting a ballot. Okay, so I'm not saying no vote-in ballots simply because there's voter fraud. I think that's a good reason. I think that's something that should be considered. But if people are, again, if there's a problem with the way that a ballot is submitted, I'm just talking about a problem. I'm not saying somebody trying to cheat the system. What if there's just some kind of problem? Doesn't hold right, or
the election officials verify whether or not there's a problem or not, and they will notify the voter about that.
At what time frame? Why? When somebody is right there, you can be right there. You're saying nobody's going to say, I didn't get that phone call. Nobody's going to say, well, wait a second, I didn't get that email, or nobody came by, or my phone. Would seem to be, we want to reduce those steps. Vote in person. That would be the best move. Why eliminate? Why take that risk? It is the one say most people will have in what is going to happen in their government, whether it's.
But of course, the retort that the other side is going to say. They're going to say, well, why take the risk of putting yourself out with a bunch of people in the midst of a global pandemic? I mean, I think.
Okay. Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's great. That's great. So we should work at coming up with more solutions, more locations that people can, not fewer locations, and using just the mail.
Okay. And to be fair, election officials have done that, at least locally here in Will County.
I have no doubt. We've been working on this for months, so I'm sure that they have.
Just to wrap up, so yes. You will be voting in person then this fall?
Yes, I will.
Okay. All right. I'm going to give you the last couple minutes here just to make your final pitch to the voters of the 11th Congressional District. Why should they elect you as their next congressman?
Thank you. Because I run as a pro-life, a pro-Second Amendment, pro-free market candidate. That's the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I want people to thrive, and I think people can do that better under a free market economy, one that's protected, where they can protect themselves, and that the sanctity of human life is valued. I want to see people take on more self-reliance, and I want to see the government reduced from their lives. I think the government, if it restricts itself to really just providing for true freedom and restraining evil, that's really what we want to see the government do. So a view different from that is not one that represents me, and I don't think it represents a lot of people, and that's why I think they should vote for me.